Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our third webinar of the Digital Telecare webinar series. I'm Siobhan Martin from the Digital Office for Scottish Local Government, and today we are joined by David Brown, Senior Manager for Assistive Technology-Enabled Care, and Craig O'Donnell, Access and Support Lead from the Edinburgh Health and Social Care Partnership. Today, we will be getting an insight into their digital telecare journey, which we're really looking forward to. So today's presentation will last about 40 minutes, and as usual, we will follow up with a Q&A session afterwards. Feel free to use the chat box throughout the webinar to ask any questions, and they will be picked up during the Q&A session at the end. So without further ado, I will pass over to Craig and David.
Hello and welcome on board, everyone. As Siobhan said, this is David and Craig here from the Edinburgh Health and Social Care Partnership, and we're going to talk today around our telecare services analog to digital transition. My name is David Brown. I'm the Senior Manager of ATEC24, which is the newly formed combined telecare equipment, aids for daily living and assisted supported housing service. And that service has been developed recently to support the needs of the people of Edinburgh. I've also been the Partnership's Lead Officer for the Digital Telecare programme since April 2017.
Hi everyone, I'm Craig O'Donnell. I'm the Access and Support Lead for Telecare and Supported Housing. I've been involved in this project since April last year from a change management perspective, and from myself, I'm really interested in how digital telecare can assist us to scale up. So moving on to slide 2, what we wanted to do was really give everybody an overview of our population makeup in Edinburgh, and a bit of information around our demographic. In terms of health and social care, we obviously work within an integrated partnership, and we very much work on a locality basis, delivering services at locality level, and that's split into 4 separate parts. So that's northwest, northeast, southeast and southwest. If I draw your attention to the table on the left hand side, you can see that we've got a circa population of around 500,000 people, with a reasonable split across male and female, and we have circa 75,000 people over the age of 65, and that's generally our target market for technology enabled care. I'd also like to draw your attention to the northwest element for our localities. That is definitely the highest population in terms of our locality services, and also has the highest amount of people over the age of 65, sorry.
Thanks, Craig. I think it's also interesting to know specifically from a service delivery perspective, just in terms of drilling down a bit on that cohort of over 65s. The Edinburgh Health and Social Care Partnership's telecare service provide a service at the moment to around 7% of that group, and one of the primary aims of the newly developed ATEC24 service is to scale up the use of technology across this demographic in the coming months and years, and hopefully the digital shift will be a key factor in supporting this. So next slide, just moving on a bit from the previous scene setting slide, we have a slide on connectivity data which outlines the City of Edinburgh's position and capability around digital access. The key headline from this slide for me is that 96% of our circa 500,000 population have broadband access at home. I was really surprised how high that number was. And you can also see from the slide that we know that 91% of that cohort do not manage utilities online, and 93% choose not to bank online. And again, for me, that data is really quite powerful in terms of illustrating that although technology infrastructure exists within the city, there's still quite a wider piece of work to do around shifting cultures and mindsets.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right, and I think the change culture is definitely required, because if someone doesn't have the confidence to manage their utilities online and bank online, I think there's quite a lot of work to be done to build up the confidence to use tech to assist them with their health and care.
I suppose just even going a bit further with that slide, even internally in terms of our own staff team, and this digital transition. There's quite a piece of work for us to do around workforce planning to make sure that staff are upskilled and have these digital skills moving forward and beyond our own team into the wider partnership and organisation to make sure that we're ready for the shift.
Definitely. So moving on to slide 4, and this really gives us a lot more operational data and talks about the pre-digital timeline, if you like. So we've spent a lot of time over the last 2 years building up the number of people we have out there who can access tech, but via mobile network rather than through your standard analog landline. And over the last 2 years, we've built up a client base of around 350 people. And to me, that's really, really interesting because it's really improved accessibility to tech across the city. Across that 2-year period, I would like to say that the total calls in, so these are alarm calls that have been generated from people who have got GSM alarms at property, is sitting around 630,000 and not 335,000. But the number of GSM alarm calls that have come in are still sitting at 47,000, which is around 7% of that overall number. Prior to us moving to a kind of GSM base for our alarms, normally people who didn't have landlines at home would either not be able to access tech that we had available, or as a service we would provide landlines to assist them to either be discharged from hospital or whatever their support needs may be. However, that was very, very costly, and the main reason that people didn't have a landline in the first place was normally because of affordability. So we would front up the cost of setting up the landline in the individual's property, but we would then rely on the client and the next of kin to kind of pay that ongoing cost. And quite often we found after 2 or 3 months, the alarm would have to be taken out because of that cost.
Thanks, Craig. I suppose, again, just to kind of drill down on that GSM service from a service delivery perspective, anyone that's participating in the webinar that's involved in operational delivery will be familiar with these issues, but certainly in Edinburgh, we historically have experienced a wide range of challenges around the use of GSM alarms. And those include service coverage, but also the use of roaming SIMs. So we've had to build up our knowledge internally around roaming SIMs, for example. So we learned that a roaming SIM can be described as that, but in reality that can mean that it'll try a particular supplier 100 or 200 times before then diverting onto a stronger signal. So we now deploy true roaming SIMs, and they will automatically go for the strongest signal available. And obviously when you're talking about a kind of piece of life-saving equipment, it's vitally important that that's quick and effective. Other issues that we've experienced around kind of reliability of equipment and cost. And I suppose moving forward, digital telecare provision should improve many of these issues for us. I think there's still quite a bit of work to be done around the SIM issue and ongoing telephony service costs. If we decide as a service to deliver this type of service at scale across our 9,000 clients, then the financial implications of that are significant. From our own point of view, in Edinburgh, we plan to review our current service charges in the next year, and that'll include some discussion around the associated SIM costs as part of the service.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. And as we move forward and we become much more of a digital platform for tech in Edinburgh, I think in the next 3 to 5 years we might see a lot more of the kind of bring your own tech. So rather than us as a provider bringing technology to the table, I think there's going to be some real value in the users at home. You know, I think there's an example from last night.
Yeah, sorry, Craig. Yeah, we were chatting today, so we were both aware last night that Apple launched a range of devices, including the Apple Watch, and it has a built-in cardiograph and a built-in fall detector. And I think, as Craig says, part of this digital shift for us is about kind of rethinking what we do. So it may be that clients have their own wearables or their own devices at home, and it's about utilising those, I think, and being much smarter about how we deliver. And very interesting to see Apple making that shift into that area. So yeah.
So moving on to slide 5, and again, this is a lot more operational data. There is a lot of data to look at, but I want to look at two specific sections. On the left-hand side, we have a list of referral reasons, and this is based on data from last September up until last Friday. And what this really kind of shows is the improved accessibility by adopting this approach. And there's three key bits of data on there that are really interesting to me. The first one is assisting hospital discharge. So we've managed to assist an additional 45 people to be discharged from hospital. You might not be aware, but in the Edinburgh partnership, we have real challenges with delayed discharge from hospital. And had we not had GSM in place, we may not have been able to assist those people as quickly from hospital. Underneath that, we've got 80 people being assisted with their quality of life. And in general terms, that's people at kind of end of life and palliative care. And we've managed to support them much more flexibly at home rather than in a residential setting. And underneath that, there's a section on home safety, and as you can see, that's got the largest amount against it, 186 people. And that's generally people who are a falls risk at home, but it could also be people who have moved out of the criminal justice system, who perhaps don't have a permanent home, and we're able to be really flexible in terms of what we can offer them. To the left-hand side, we have something that's called an ECO breakdown, which is emergency call-outs. So this is the care and support side of what we do. And this is based on GSM calls specifically from last September up until last Friday. So we've received circa 26,000 alarm calls from GSM alarms out with clients, and we have responded to 515 emergency calls, which is where we know exactly what's happened in the house and what the support need is, and we've responded to 547 unconfirmed alarms, which is generally where we've been unable to carry out a full kind of triage by phone, and we have to go out and assist. Interestingly, at the bottom, ambulance called at client request. This is generally the data that shows us how many people were admitted to hospital once we'd been out. And as you can see, that's a fairly low number. So that's sitting at 24, and that's normally what we describe as a kind of hospital conveyance rate. And we're quite proud to have quite a low hospital conveyance rate, and that reflects kind of 2.2% of our overall calls.
Yeah, I think also for myself, just in terms of that data, specifically around assisting hospital discharge, preventing long-term admission and avoiding hospital admission, these figures are much lower than I would have expected, and certainly lower than the data we capture for our mainstream service. So I think there's a piece of work for us to do around how we capture and record this data.
Yeah.
And you know, additionally, these specific areas, as Craig mentioned, are key priorities for the new service, and what the service has committed to offering to the partnership and to wider stakeholders. So that will be a key focus for us in terms of the digital shift that we're discussing today. I think it's also just worth highlighting that many of these GSM units that we have in the field provide a much larger amount of data than we're used to holding. So some of the information specifically about kind of uptime and downtime, so downtime being when the alarm isn't working. That will happen regularly for analogue clients that we have at the moment, but we won't be aware of it. So once we become aware and we hold that data, we need to think how we react to that data and how as a service we'll be able to do that at scale. So I think that's another key factor for us moving forward. Okay, so next slide, just in terms of the digital shift. Following the announcement from all of the major telephony suppliers that there would be a switch off of all of the analogue infrastructure by 2025, and I think it was also subsequently announced that no new services in terms of the analogue service would be provided to users by 2023. So it was recognised that following that announcement that there was a unique opportunity, I think, for Scotland to shift the 130,000 approximately service users connected via analogue telephone to an internet-based telecare solution that would significantly improve the service they receive. A feasibility study was completed around that time by Farpoint on behalf of SCTT in 2016, and this report shaped how the Digital Telecare programme moved forward. In terms of our own action here, the Edinburgh Health and Social Care Partnership successfully bid to become part of Wave 1, and that's alongside Perth and Kinross Council and Beeld. and we are tasked with focusing on developing a circa 100 telecare users with a digital telecare service. The programme launched around October 2017 for us, and we began a range of activity to scope and plan the project, and that includes work around cyber security, including data privacy impact assessment work, penetration testing work, as well as digital upgrade work to our ARC, our Alarm Receiving Centre, and our DRC, our Disaster Recovery Centre sites. As part of the shift, there was a requirement for infrastructure upgrade, and all of the organisations involved bid for CAPEX funding to support all of the activity that was going on.
Yep, I think it might be worthwhile just mentioning as well, we've kind of taken a typical 5-stage implementation approach here. We've kind of worked through the kind of initial conception, but I would say we're still kind of bridging between step 2 and 3, which is around planning, and still trying to get to that stage where we're trying to launch and implement the pilot. So that is kind of where we're sitting at the moment.
I suppose just the last piece for me about the start of the programme, just to kind of play back my experience of the first TAG meeting, so the Technical Advisory Group meeting. I felt in Edinburgh we were relatively well placed for this programme. We had, at that point, I think we had over 100 of these devices deployed. At that time they were operating via GSM over air, but with a fairly straightforward piece of reprogramming, they could be digitally enabled. So I arrived at that meeting feeling fairly comfortable about where we are, and I think Steve Sadler at that time, who works for the TSA, provided a presentation, and really it was incredibly powerful. Steve has had experience in delivering this type of programme abroad, I think in Australia and Sweden in the past, and all of the assumptions certainly that I held were kind of quite swept away. So it was very powerful, very interesting, and I think my experience of the TAG so far has been really good. I think in the first meeting there was a culture setting, a bit of work done around making sure that it was collaborative and it was agile, and that we were willing to share as a group any of the learning from the programme, and I think that's been demonstrated throughout the programme so far. So that's been really useful from my point of view.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, having been involved in telecare projects that have been funded at a national level before, I think this is the first time that there's been so much kind of rigour in programme management. That's kind of, I think it's really helped us actually move through the process. And I think a lot of that kind of pins back to the onboarding of things like GDPR, a lot more scrutiny in terms of IT security, especially within public sector as well. So yeah. So moving on to slide 7, which is really the start of our timeline, and we're starting in March 2018. The first thing we really done was looked at ISDN capability assessment and testing. So our service has had a ISDN 30 infrastructure since April 2014. And really what we wanted to do was upgrade within that month, but we did have a bit of a challenge because we were also relocating this service to a separate site at that time also. So we carried out a capability assessment, and we identified that our ISDN 30 network at our main site was absolutely fine and can go ahead for upgrade, but our DR site only had a kind of partial ISDN 30 setup. So that had some challenges, I think, to say the least.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I suppose again just to kind of try and demonstrate some of our learning in this programme, but certainly that at that time I became aware that ISDN was obsolete technology, which really kind of informed some of the discussions we held with some of our own ICT colleagues and others, and you know, embarking on a piece of work around installing that has to be considered quite carefully. I suppose it's also worth just highlighting, as Craig says, whilst carrying out this particular piece of work, we were planning a service relocation that was part of a wider organisational review. And some of the challenges for us that we experienced through that piece were some difficulty around ICT support and telephony knowledge internally. I don't know if anyone's aware, but our ARC, our Alarm Receiving Centre platform, sits off of our corporate network. So at the moment it's not supported internally by ICT colleagues, and that's been historically a decision that we were quite comfortable with because we felt it protected the system in terms of data protection, in terms of resilience. I think that's become clear to us over the last year or so that as we make this digital shift, that's no longer suitable for us. So at the moment, I'm leading a piece of work to bring our Jontech system into the corporate network. And that's supported us to engage with ICT colleagues and really kind of have discussions where they're starting to learn more about the system and more about what the system can do. So I think that should potentially allow us as a service to operate a bit more efficiently, a bit more smartly in the future, and also allow internal colleagues across the partnership and beyond to operate a bit more efficiently and to deliver more effective and joined up services.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely spot on. I mean, reflecting back maybe 5 or 6 years, we always took the view that having the alarm receiving centre as a kind of self-contained infrastructure was the kind of better way to manage and improve. But as you said, you know, there's been so much change that we, you know, over the last 18 months, it's been a real learning curve for us. So yeah.
So just moving through our journey into April 2018, some of the activity in that period, we developed a migration plan to support the upgrade of main and disaster recovery sites. We were awarded additional penetration testing funding, and just in terms of our learning, I think in terms of this project, that some of these pieces have been really key for us. So penetration testing specifically has been a complex issue for us to navigate through, and we now have, I think, partly through this programme and raising our profile internally, we now have quite a good level of internal support around this. Site survey of our current infrastructure was completed. We had ongoing discussions around penetration testing, not only internally with our ICT colleagues, but with all of the suppliers involved. And as I say, we had ongoing supplier engagement throughout this period, and we were doing additional work on our data privacy impact assessment, and we attended a learning workshop at that time, which was delivered internally by information security colleagues, which was really helpful actually in terms of moving this forward.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the privacy impact assessment, we did have a bit of a setback because we'd been going through what had been the kind of standard privacy impact assessment process. And then with GDPR launching in May, the council's policy and process changed, so we had to do quite a lot of revision in terms of how we took that forward, and it's still waiting to be approved as well.
And I suppose just talking about kind of challenges and issues for us going through this project, as Craig says, I think not only did that have an impact on us, but it had an impact on the whole organisation, just trying to get a sense of how to navigate through that. So I think we're getting there now, and I think we're making progress, but that's been another kind of issue for us to overcome. Yeah, definitely. So moving on to May 2018, some of the activity in that period included Jontech hardware and software upgrades. Again, at our main site and at our business continuity site, we started completing baseline data reports. And these are fairly limited at the moment because we are not currently offering a full digital service. But I think I touched on this earlier. I think there's another piece of learning for us here about how we deal with this equipment. So it's new to us in terms of being able to access online portals, for example, and some of the data that contains. So we started having conversations around that time internally with our full staff team, actually, about where this activity might sit. It needs to be a 24-hour activity. So does it sit with, you know, frontline staff, frontline call handling staff, response staff? Does it sit only with managers? And part of the process for us actually right through this programme is we've tried really hard to make sure that the frontline teams are really engaged with over this, and they're briefed and kept, you know, we take them with us. So we started having conversations there, I think, about the information we hold and how we can access that. I think I've touched on it already, but we also did additional work in that month on our DPIA in terms of getting that assessed and evaluated.
Yeah, and just to point out as well, on slide 4, a lot of the baseline data information is sitting on slide 4. The only thing that's really missing from that is data on failed calls. And I think after the webinar, I think it'd be worthwhile pulling together some of that data to look at the differences between analog and GSM, so we can get a reasonable kind of handle what's happening there. And I think it would be really beneficial as well if partners could share that information with us as well. So moving on to July 2018, not so long ago now, we were very kindly distributed the Digital Telecare Go Live checklist from the national programme. And we really used that to kind of assess our operational readiness, and we found it very, very helpful actually, because there were quite a few gaps at that point in time in terms of process that we had to work on and improve. We also circulated the cyber security questionnaires that were also shared by the national programme, and we're still waiting on all of them to come back. And thirdly, we started to procure the digital alarm equipment from 2 out of our 3 chosen suppliers to take this programme forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of cyber security questionnaires, I think again this is just a really interesting learning point. Certainly for myself, it's the first time I've been involved in anything of that nature. And but what you would really hope from this programme is that the almost the kind of pain that we're going through at the moment can reduce a bit of disruption for other services as they want to kind of embark on this journey. So, in terms of that piece, and also maybe penetration testing as well, there should be parts of those processes that others can learn from, replicate, maybe avoid doing actually. I mean, obviously everybody's technical arrangement will be different, but there should be elements of those pieces that people can pick up and replicate. So I suppose the only other thing that's missing from in terms of our activity through that period was we report on a weekly basis. We provide checkpoint reports and also monthly partnership updates. And I think that's, although it feels a wee bit onerous at times in terms of the reporting, I think it's been really helpful for us just to have a regular check on progress we're making, even in terms of this webinar, just to kind of reflect back a bit and look at kind of the work that's happened in the last 12 months. So that activity has been woven right through this last year. So that's been helpful. So just moving into August 2018. So the key kind of activity for us was around Escape software upgrade. Craig's touched on it earlier, but we at this time were not able to fully test Digital Telecare that we've procured from 3 suppliers. We experienced an initial issue a couple of weeks ago now, where one of the analog calls found its way onto a digital escape line. And again, just in terms of this kind of being a Pathfinder project, that's obviously a new issue for us to establish what had gone wrong, do a bit of investigation. So we kind of did a wee bit of work there to work out how that occurred. And we worked in partnership with our Alarm Receiving Centre provider, Jontech, to establish the facts and scope out a couple of solutions. So we have an additional software upgrade plan for later this month to resolve that issue. And following that, we'll move back into the testing regime that we had embarked on in terms of these devices, and we hope to learn quite a lot from that.
Yep, and just one other thing for August, as we've been building up to this webinar, we've kind of used this as an opportunity to start communicating within our own health and social care partnership. So that's one of the other key things we've been doing, is really trying to share what we're doing in terms of this transition.
So moving on to what we kind of feel were the biggest challenges for us today. I've touched on this already, and I suppose just to reaffirm that our current alarm receiving centre system is off the corporate network, and as I said, we've recently made the decision to change that and bring it into the corporate network. And for me, I think, although it's been a bit painful for us, some of that piece, I think I would hope that that's really valuable for any other services that are in that position in terms of the learning for us throughout that. So we're really happy to share that. I think the digital skills gap, I've touched on that as well, but I think since the start of this programme, actually, we've been really aware that we're shifting here from an analogue system into a digital world, and whilst there's lots of appetite internally for that, we don't have the right skills and abilities in our team at the moment. So we've spent quite a bit of time discussing about upskilling our team, and also it's shaped how we recruit at the moment as well. So we're really acutely aware that we need to make sure that moving forward we have that range of skills within our own team. And just following on from that kind of workforce planning, again, that's been a critical piece for us around this shift. So this informs every kind of decision we make at the moment around how the service is staffed, how we recruit, and how we move the service forward.
Yeah, and I know we've touched on it on previous slides, but the relocation of our ARC infrastructure was definitely a challenge back in March, April time. I think having the dependencies across trying to relocate the infrastructure, as well as upgrading the ISDN 30 network at our DR site, as well as making sure that we were ready for the upgrade to the full system. It took a lot of kind of time and a lot of planning to get that as right as possible. Number 5 is a kind of broad stroke challenge around the kind of demographic and financial issues that we have within the partnership, and nationally as well. There's a lot of kind of fiscal challenge and a real push for us to scale up and improve accessibility as much as possible to try and reduce dependency on care at home. And when we work through that process, quite often there's a lot of consideration to the purchase of technology and the technology element of technology-enabled care, but quite often we forget about the kind of support and wraparound that's needed at the back of that to actually support the person.
So just to kind of focus on lessons learned for us so far. So improved programme management at a local level. I think, again, right since the inception of this programme for us, we've been aware that this is, many people that are participating in this webinar will be familiar with this challenge, but this is additional work in terms of trying to fold this into our business as usual, and really having a kind of structure to how you move it forward is critical. We've since the start of this programme, we've met regularly, we've held project meetings, we've tried to take a kind of agile approach, and as I said earlier, we've been really keen and careful to try and include our own team in this programme as well, to make sure they're briefed on it. In terms of number 2, I think I've kind of touched on that as well, but we've been really keen to promote our service internally. I think right back at the start of this, I described our new service, which has just gone through an organisational review, and what we're really keen to do is demonstrate much clearer how we can offer to support locality teams and beyond to deliver their services. So I think this webinar has been really helpful for us actually to promote our service internally and to promote this shift internally and what it might offer other stakeholders.
Yep. Moving on to number 3, I think it's fair to say that we've both probably underestimated the paradigm shift and transferring our ARC to the corporate network. I think there's a lot of benefits that can come from it, shared knowledge, insight and experience, improved business continuity, which is something that we've had a challenge with over the last 2 or 3 years, greater focus on kind of commercial and contractual arrangements, and a much more guided approach when there's legislative changes in terms of IT. Yeah. And number 4 is really about using the privacy impact assessment as part of our continuous improvement approach, and that's something that we are working on at the moment.
So in terms of the summary, I think we looked initially at some contextual data, and we explored the kind of the Edinburgh Health Social Care Partnership's role within that to deliver a telecare service to around about 9,000 clients across the city, and what this digital shift might mean for those users, and also allow us to upscale a bit further. Hopefully Craig and I have provided a clear, helpful and coherent outline of our digital journey so far and the opportunities and the challenges that exist within that.
Yep. In terms of the positive outcomes, I just wanted to raise that at the end to reflect on the kind of the pre-digital timeline, which is we've been able to support a lot more people to be discharged from hospital. We've enabled a lot more people at kind of end of life and palliative care to be supported at home in a much more flexible way, and enabled people to live more safely at home as well. And that, in my view, improved equity and access to tech across society. In terms of challenges and lessons learned, this is really just a summary of the slides we've just been through. But I think moving our alarm receiving centre into the corporate infrastructure will definitely be our next step. We've got digital and workforce challenges. And when I say digital and workforce challenges, I mean upskilling members of the public as well as members of staff to ensure that they can engage as much as possible. The challenge of relocating while upgrading our ISDN 30 network. And we've already talked about the kind of broader fiscal challenges and pressure on tech to reduce the level of care at home.
Thank you very much, David and Craig. I'm sure you'll all agree that that was very informative. Now we're going to move on to the question and answer session. We've got a couple of questions just now. However, I'll give you all a few minutes to type into the chat box if you've got any further questions for the guys. So while we wait, just a couple of things to note. There will be a Digital Telecare event held in Glasgow on the 8th of October. We will circulate information about that following the webinar, along with a feedback survey. And we would really appreciate if you could fill that in. We're continually seeking feedback on what you would like to see throughout this webinar series. So that would be really good if you could complete that for us. The session has actually been recorded, so that will be uploaded onto YouTube as well, and information on that will be circulated round so you can watch that. It can be accessed at a later date. So David and Craig, we do have a couple of questions, but if there's any questions following the webinar being completed, then do feel free to email info@digitaloffice.scot and David or Craig will respond to you in due course. So the first question we have is, have you found any risks in reliability over using GSM with peripheral devices?
Not for me. I think I think I touched on this in the presentation. We actually withdrew this service, this offering, probably about 5 or 6 years ago because we weren't comfortable with some of the issues around SIM reliability and also some of the issues around the equipment itself. And we certainly weren't willing to offer you know, any other kind of peripheral equipment attached to a system that we weren't confident in. So there was probably about a year where we withdrew this. We did quite a significant piece of work at that time around, I touched on the issue around roaming SIMs. And we're probably quite well placed in Edinburgh in terms of coverage. I think there'll be other challenges across the country that maybe more rural areas, but we are confident in Edinburgh that the SIMs and equipment we use are reliable. They're quite thoroughly rigorously tested. So we deploy any equipment as required with these units now. I think we've been doing that for over maybe 18 months, and I'm not aware of any occasions where it hasn't worked, you know, where we've been made aware of issues.
Yeah, I mean, that's not to say that we're not aware of the potential risks, and I think we've tried to be quite pragmatic and be upfront with clients and the next of kin to say, you know, it's not foolproof. You know, just like your mobile phone, you know, it can drop network, and it's the exact same with tech as well. You know?
I think that's right, and I suppose another piece of learning, I think we might have touched on this as well, but another piece of learning for us was when you start to explore these online portals and the information you get, you start to reflect a bit on how that compares with an analog service. And I know, for example, my own phone at home, there'll be patches of time that doesn't work, and so even someone having an analog system, there's periods of downtime within that. So it's about, as Craig said, it's about kind of being upfront with that, but also just accepting a level of risk, I think, within some of that equipment. But I think we're as confident as we've ever been in terms of this GSM piece.
Fab, thank you very much. Next question, how supportive and informed were your ICT support provider during this process?
Our ICT provider were very open and very willing to be supportive, but I think I've touched on some of the legacy issues. So we made a conscious decision historically to keep Jontech off the corporate network. And that means that internally we've never allowed our own ICT colleagues to build up their knowledge or get involved in some of these conversations. And through transformation, we lost quite a lot of internal expertise as well. So we were always relatively well placed in the past in terms of our own kind of skills and support. But now that we are exploring bringing Jontech into the corporate network, ICT colleagues are absolutely up for it. And you know, our world is absolutely changing. We need to be much smarter about the huge amount of data we hold on these 9,000 clients and how that can support colleagues in the partnership and beyond. So that there's lots of appetite and lots of energy, but we're on quite a steep learning curve, I think. So yeah, but I think pretty good so far. Yeah.
That's great. Next question is the connectivity data on slide 3. What was your source for that?
The connectivity data on slide 3 was based on a locality profiling exercise that was undertaken as part of the City of Edinburgh Council's transformation programme. And from memory, it was from 2015. I would need to confirm that though, and I could potentially share the actual locality profiling document with you as well. I think it's available on the council website.
Great. And just to reiterate, all the slides will be shared afterwards, and the recording will be put on YouTube, so that will be shared with you all. Next question we have is, are you able to share what suppliers you have used? And when you said you were using 2 roaming SIMs, are they in separate units for different areas, or are they both within the one unit?
Yeah, in terms of suppliers, our alarm receiving centre is provided by Jontech, and we've procured digital units from Possum, Tyne-Tech and Doro. I was probably mumbling during the presentation, but what I said about SIMs was instead of 2 roaming SIMs, it was true, so TRUE. So what that means is that it's a truly roaming SIM, and that'll immediately go for the strongest signal, rather than the issue we discovered a few years ago where it will divert to a particular telephony supplier a couple of hundred times maybe before it tries any other signals, and that telephony supplier might not be the strongest signal. So that was a kind of a key piece of learning for us. So we use truly roaming SIMs, and I know that the suppliers, I think, are using a couple of different manufacturers for those. So CSL Dualcomm and Mobius are the 2 that are in use.
Great, thanks. Have you any ideas about new telehealth related things that you can do with digital technology enabled care?
I think there's a range of opportunities out there in terms of adopting digital telehealth care. What we face at the moment is we are still very much going through a digital transition, as is our alarm receiving supplier. Those of you who've been in the sector know how that infrastructure works, and what we want to do is move to a position of being much more open source. I think we mentioned earlier about the kind of future plan of 3 to 5 years, really where we'd want to be is kind of at where people bring their own equipment, bring their own tech, and we're able to facilitate and support that in some way. In terms of telehealth care within Edinburgh, the telehealth care element is actually provided by NHS Lothian, so it's not actually something that we are specifically involved in at this point in time.
That's fab. We don't seem to have any more questions at the moment, but if any of our attendees do wish to ask anything further, then please do email the email address info@digitaloffice.scot. Another quick update is that regarding data collection and field calls, the National Tech Programme will be looking at setting a definition of a field call, and will be collating this nationally. So that will be the learnings of that will be circulated at the event planned for the 8th of October in Glasgow. Again, the information on that event will be circulated to all of our attendees. You will see from the presentation that's up on the screen just now, we do have our next webinar planned for the 29th of October, nice and early in the morning, and we will be joined by Andy Grayland, who is the Chief Information Security Officer for the Digital Office, and also Chief Technology Officer Colin Birchinall, and they will be looking at penetration testing, data protection impact assessment, and also the general sort of security around digital telecare in Scotland. So sorry, we've got one last question that's just come in before we sign out. In regards to emergency call-outs in the operational slides, were they via a response service that was provided in-house or commissioned, or a named or nominated responder that the service user provided? This attendee is just trying to understand what types of emergency response entails.
At Service Startup, we do offer we offer next to kin and clients themselves to choose in terms of their priority who they would like to attend the call, but overwhelmingly families and clients choose that we will attend primarily. It may be that we let next to kin know that we're on our way, but overwhelmingly those would be our own internal response team that attended those calls.
That's great. Thank you very much. So, yep, a huge thank you to both David and Craig. I'm sure you'll agree they have been both brilliant today. And we would just like to thank you on behalf of the Digital Office for Scottish Local Government, NHS 24 and the Technology Enabled Care Programme, and obviously the Edinburgh Health and Social Care Partnership today. And we do hope that you will join us on the next webinar on Monday the 29th of October. And again, any further questions, please do not hesitate to get in touch. See you all later.